Okay, so you want to buy a mansion. A dozen bedrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, a driveway long enough that guests forget where the front door actually is. You picture yourself hosting dinner parties in a room the size of a restaurant, swimming laps in your own indoor pool while it snows outside, and building generational wealth in the process, because everyone knows real estate only goes up. That's the picture. That's what the listing photos are built to make you feel. Here's what the listing doesn't show you. The $4,000 electric bill in July, the roofer who needs 3 weeks and a crane just to inspect one wing, the property tax bill that arrives like a second mortgage, and the fact that the generational wealth part of the plan assumes someone else will eventually want to buy an 18,000 square foot house, which turns out to be a much smaller group of people than you'd think. Owning a mansion is one of the strangest assets in all of personal finance, because unlike almost anything else marketed as an investment, a mansion's entire purpose is to lose money in exchange for status, and understanding exactly how much money and where it goes is the real story here. Before you make a single decision about furniture or floor plans, you need to survive the purchase itself, and mansions do not price the way ordinary homes price. A standard home's value scales fairly predictably with square footage and location. A mansion's value scales with something much harder to pin down: scarcity of comparable buyers. According to real estate economists, ultra-luxury homes, typically defined as properties above $10 million, sell in a market with only a few hundred qualified buyers in any given city at any given time. That means a mansion can sit on the market for 2 or 3 years, not because it's overpriced in absolute terms, but because the pool of people who both want and can afford that specific combination of size, location, and style is genuinely tiny. A $2 million house has thousands of potential buyers. A $20 million house might have 20. Then there's the build cost itself, if you're constructing rather than buying resale. High-end custom construction in major markets runs anywhere from $400 to $1,500 per square foot, depending on materials, region, and finish level. A 15,000 square foot mansion at the mid-range of that spectrum can easily run past $10 million before landscaping, a pool, or a single stick of furniture, and that's before the land, which in prime neighborhoods can cost more than the house itself. In parts of Los Angeles, Aspen, or the Hamptons, raw lots suitable for mansion-scale construction have sold for $20 to $50 million for the dirt alone. So here's the first thing nobody tells you when they picture owning a mansion. You're not really buying a house, you're buying the most illiquid asset class in residential real estate, and the price tag tells you almost nothing about how easily you could ever get that money back out. Say you've closed on the mansion. The purchase price seemed reasonable, or at least defensible. Before you've hosted a single dinner party, there's a layer of ongoing costs that catches nearly every new owner off guard, and it's bigger by a wide margin than what people expect. The general rule of thumb among wealth managers is that a large home costs somewhere between 1% and 4% of its purchase price per year just to maintain and operate, not including the mortgage. On a $10 million mansion, that's $100,000 to $400,000 a year. Every year, whether you live there full-time or visit twice a summer. Property taxes are the first and largest recurring cost. In high-tax states, a $10 million property can generate a property tax bill north of $150,000 annually. That's before you've paid for a single light bulb. Second, insurance. Standard homeowners' policies don't cover mansions properly, so owners need specialty high-value home insurance, which factors in the cost to fully rebuild a custom structure, the value of any art or wine collections inside, and increasingly, climate risk. Mansions in wildfire zones in California or hurricane corridors in Florida have seen insurers refuse to renew policies altogether in recent years, forcing owners into far more expensive state-backed insurance pools as a last resort. Third, staff. A mansion of any real size does not run itself. A live-in or daily housekeeper, a groundskeeper for landscaping that can span several acres, a pool technician, and often a full-time property manager to coordinate all of it, are not luxuries, they're structural requirements. Combined household staff for a large estate commonly runs $150,000 to $500,000 a year in major markets, and that's before considering security staff, which many owners at the very top of the market maintain full-time. Fourth, and this is the one almost nobody budgets for correctly, systems maintenance at scale. A mansion isn't just a bigger house. It's a small commercial building wearing a residential disguise. HVAC systems large enough to climate control 15,000 square feet cost tens of thousands of dollars to service and eventually replace. A single roof replacement on a mansion, given the complexity of custom roof lines, dormers, and materials, can run past $500,000. Pools, home theaters, wine cellars with precise humidity control, elevators, these are all systems that break. And when they break, there is no handyman fix. There is a specialist, an invoice, and a wait. Here's where it gets interesting because unlike a mall or an airport, a mansion produces essentially zero income. There is no tenant paying rent, no percentage of sales, no landing fee. The entire financial logic of owning a mansion runs in exactly one direction, out. Which raises the obvious question, why would anyone do this? The answer is that a mansion isn't purchased as an income-producing asset, it's purchased as a store of status with an assumed, not guaranteed floor on its resale value. Wealth advisors will tell you that ultra-luxury real estate should be thought of less like a stock and more like a very large, very illiquid piece of jewelry. It can hold value. In strong markets, it can even appreciate. But it will never generate cash flow while you own it. And the carrying costs, that 1% to 4% every single year, mean the property has to appreciate meaningfully just for the owner to break even against what they spent maintaining it. This is the part that trips up new money more than old money. Families who have owned estates for generations typically understand mansions as consumption, not investment. They've built the maintenance costs into their financial planning the way you'd budget for a hobby, because that's functionally what it is. Buyers who come into sudden wealth and purchase a mansion as their first major asset often make the mistake of treating it like their other investments, expecting it to behave like a stock portfolio or a rental property. It doesn't. It behaves like a very beautiful, very expensive liability that happens to have a resale value attached to it. Now here's the trap almost nobody sees coming until they own the place. Mansions depreciate functionally even while appreciating on paper. A kitchen that was cutting edge in 2010 looks dated by 2025. Buyers at the top of the market expect current design trends, current technology, current finishes. Owners who don't continually reinvest in the property, sometimes millions of dollars every decade just to keep the home feeling contemporary, find that when they finally go to sell, buyers discount the price to cover the renovation they'll have to do themselves. The mansion that cost $12 million to build in 2005 might sell for $11 million in 2025, not because the land lost value, but because the structure on it needs a $3 million refresh that the market has priced in. This depreciation problem compounds in a way that's easy to underestimate. Unlike a normal home renovation, where updating a kitchen might cost $80,000 and be done in 2 months, a mansion-scale renovation touches systems most owners never think about until they're staring at the invoice. Rewiring a 20,000 square foot home for modern smart home integration, replacing custom millwork that was hand-carved decades earlier and can no longer be matched by any supplier, restoring stonework or roofing materials quarried from sources that no longer operate. These are not weekend projects. Contractors specializing in ultra-luxury renovation routinely quote timelines of 18 months to 3 years for a full estate refresh, during which the owner is paying full carrying costs, staff, insurance, taxes, utilities, on a house that generates zero income and currently isn't even livable. To understand how this plays out in the real world, it helps to look at one real mansion from construction to sale. The Spelling Manor in Los Angeles, built by television producer Aaron Spelling in the 1980s and 1990s, was at one point the largest single-family residence in Los Angeles County, at roughly 56,000 square feet with 123 rooms, a bowling alley, a gift wrapping room, and a barber shop. Construction reportedly cost tens of millions of dollars. After Spelling's death, The estate was sold in 2011 for $85 million to an heiress who, according to reporting at the time, had no intention of living in it as is. She spent years, and by some estimates, tens of millions more on renovations before eventually listing it again. The mansion sold in 2019 after an extended time on the market for $119.75 million, a headline number that looked like a huge win. But once carrying costs across nearly a decade, renovation spending, taxes, insurance, and staff were factored in. The actual return on the holding period was far thinner than the sale price alone suggested, and significantly below what the same capital would have earned sitting in an index fund over the same years. That's the mansion story in miniature. A genuinely enormous headline number on the way out, and a much less impressive number underneath it once you count everything that had to be paid just to keep the building standing and stylish for a decade. The Spelling Manor is the version of this story where things worked out eventually for someone. It's worth balancing that against the far more common version, the mansion that never recovers what was spent on it. Take the case of the so-called spec mansions that flooded markets like Bel Air and Holmby Hills in the mid-2000s. Developers, betting on an endless appetite from international buyers, began constructing speculative mega mansions before any buyer was lined up, some priced north of $100 million, built purely on the assumption that demand at the very top of the market would keep climbing. One of the most publicized cases involved a Bel Air mansion built on spec for a reported construction cost north of $100 million, listed at $150 million, then repeatedly slashed, eventually selling at auction years later for roughly $126 million, a headline figure that still sounds enormous until you account for years of carrying costs, interest on construction loans, and the fact that the original ask implied a profit margin that never materialized. In several comparable cases across the same neighborhoods during that period, developers who couldn't find buyers were forced into distressed sales or lender foreclosures, watching properties that cost 8 or 9 figures to build get auctioned off at 30% to 50% below construction cost, because at that price point, there simply were not enough buyers in the world in any given year to absorb the supply. This is the risk hiding underneath every mansion transaction, whether you're the buyer or worse, the builder. The asset class has almost no floor mechanism. A mid-market home in a normal downturn might drop 10% to 20% and find buyers again fairly quickly, because the pool of people who can afford a $400,000 house is enormous, and even a modest price cut pulls in the next wave of them. A $100 million mansion in a downturn doesn't have a next wave. It has the same 3 or 4 buyers worldwide who could ever have afforded it in the first place, and if none of them want a house in that specific city that year, the price doesn't gently soften. It falls off a cliff. Sometimes for years, until either the market changes or the seller simply gives up and holds. That's the piece that separates mansions from every other asset covered in this format. A mall's income depends on tenants. An airport's income depends on passengers. A ranch's income depends on cattle prices and rainfall. All three have some mechanism, however painful, for adjusting to bad conditions. Cut rent, cut fees, sell the herd early. A mansion has no adjustment mechanism at all. It cannot lower its own costs. The roof still needs replacing whether the market is up or down. The insurance bill doesn't care what the house is worth this year. The only lever an owner actually controls is whether to keep paying to hold it, or to sell into a market that may not want to buy. There is one more layer that separates mansions from every other asset in this format. The mansion is also often the most emotionally significant purchase its owner will ever make, which means it's frequently the last asset an owner is willing to sell, even when the math says they should. Estates sit half-maintained, technically owned, technically appreciating on paper, while the carrying costs quietly accumulate for years because selling would mean admitting the dream cost more than it returned. That emotional stickiness is not something you'll find in a spreadsheet, but it explains more about why so many mansions end up decaying, changing hands for a fraction of their construction cost, or sitting empty for a decade, than any purely financial explanation ever could. So if you're picturing the dinner parties and the indoor pool while it snows outside, that picture is real. People do live that life. What the listing photos leave out is that the real product you're buying isn't the house. It's the privilege of paying every single year for the right to keep it.